Lamia by John Keats. Narrated by Susie Hennessy. Part 2. Love in a hut with water and a crust is, love forgive us, cinder, ashes, dust. Love in a palace is perhaps at last more grievous torment than a hermit's fast that is a doubtful tale from fairyland, hard for the non-elect to understand. Had Lycius lived to hand his story down, he might have given the moral a fresh frown, or clenched it quite. But too short was their bliss to breed distrust and hate that make the soft voice hiss. Besides, there, nightly, with terrific glare, love, jealous grown of so complete a pair, hovered and buzzed his wings with fearful roar above the lintel of their chamber door, and down the passage cast a glow upon the floor. For all this came a ruin. Side by side they were enthroned in the eventide upon a couch, near to a curtaining whose airy texture from a golden string floated into the room, and let appear unveiled the summer heaven, blue and clear, betwixt two marble shafts. There they reposed, where use had made it sweet, with eyelids closed, saving a tithe which love still open kept, that they might see each other while they almost slept. When, from the slope side of a suburb hill, deafening the swallow's twitter, came a thrill of trumpets. Lycius started. The sounds fled, but left a thought, a buzzing in his head. For the first time, since first he harboured in that purple-lined palace of sweet sin, his spirit passed beyond its golden bourne into the noisy world almost forsworn. The lady, ever watchful, penetrant, saw this with pain, so arguing a want of something more than her empery of joys. And she began to moan and sigh, because he mused beyond her, knowing well that but a moment's thought is passion's passing bell. "Why do you sigh, fair creature?" whispered he. "Why do you think?" returned she tenderly. "You have deserted me. Where am I now? Not in your heart, while care weighs on your brow. No, you have dismissed me, and I go from your breast houseless. Aye, it must be so." He answered, bending to her open eyes, where he was mirrored small in paradise. "My silver planet, both of eve and morn, why will you plead yourself so sad forlorn, while I am striving how to fill my heart with deeper crimson and a double smart? How to entangle, trammel up and snare your soul in mine, and labyrinth you there like the hit scent in an unbudded rose? Aye, a sweet kiss, you see your mighty woes. My thoughts, shall I unveil them? Listen then. What mortal hath a prize that other men may be confounded and abashed withal, but lets it sometimes pace abroad majestical, and triumph, as in thee I should rejoice amid the hoarse alarm of Corinth's voice? Let my foes choke and my friends shout afar, while through the thronged streets your bridal car wheels round its dazzling spokes." The lady's cheek trembled. She nothing said, but pale and meek arose and knelt before him, wept a rain of sorrows at his words, at last with pain beseeching him, the while his hand she wrung to change his purpose. He thereat was stung, perverse, with stronger fancy to reclaim her wild and timid nature to his aim. Besides, for all his love, in self-despite against his better self, he took delight luxurious in her sorrows, soft and new. His passion, cruel grown, took on a hue fierce and sanguinous as 'twas possible in one whose brow had no dark veins to swell. Fine was the mitigated fury, like Apollo's presence when in act to strike the serpent. Ha! The serpent! Certes, she was none. She burnt, she loved the tyranny, and, all subdued, consented to the hour when to the bridal he should lead his paramour. Whispering in midnight silence, said the youth, "Sure some sweet name thou hast, though, by my truth, I have not asked it, ever thinking thee not mortal, but of heavenly progeny, as still I do. Hast any mortal name fit appellation for this dazzling frame? Or friends or kinsfolk on the citied earth to share our marriage feast and nuptial mirth?" "I have no friends," said Lamia, "no, not one, my presence in wide Corinth hardly known. My parents' bones are in their dusty urns sepulchred, where no kindled incense burns, seeing all their luckless race are dead save me, and I neglect the holy rite for thee. Even as you list invite your many guests, but if, as now it seems, your vision rests with any pleasure on me, do not bid old Apollonius. From him keep me hid." Lysias, perplexed at words so blind and blank, made close inquiry, from whose touch she shrank, feigning a sleep, and he to the dull shade of deep sleep in a moment was betrayed. It was the custom then to bring away the bride from home at blushing shut of day, veiled in a chariot, heralded along by strewn flowers, torches, and a marriage song, with other pageants. But this fair unknown had not a friend. So, being left alone, Lysias was gone to summon all his kin, and knowing surely she could never win his foolish heart from its mad pompousness, she set herself, high-thoughted, how to dress the misery in fit magnificence. She did so, but 'tis doubtful how and whence came, and who were her subtle servitors. About the halls and to and from the doors there was a noise of wings, till in short space the glowing banquet room shone with wide-arched grace. A haunting music, sole perhaps and lone supportress of the fairy roof, made moan throughout, as fearful the whole charm might fade. Fresh carved cedar, mimicking a glade of palm and plantain, met from either side, high in the midst, in honour of the bride. 2 palms and then 2 plantains, and so on, from either side their stems branched, one to one, all down the aisled place, and beneath all there ran a stream of lamps straight on, from wall to wall. So canopied lay an untasted feast, teeming with odours. Lamia, regal dressed, silently paced about, and as she went, in pale contented sort of discontent, missioned her viewless servants to enrich the fretted splendour of each nook and niche. Between the tree stems, Marbled plain at first, came jasper panels. Then, anon, there burst forth creeping imagery of slighter trees, and with the larger wove in small intricacies. Approving all, she faded at self-will, and shut the chamber up, close, hushed, and still, complete and ready for the revels rude, when dreadful guests would come to spoil her solitude. The day appeared, and all the gossip rout. O senseless Lycius, madman! Wherefore flout the silent blessing fate, warm cloistered hours, and show to common eyes these secret bowers? The herd approached. Each guest, with busy brain, arriving at the portal, gazed amain and entered marvelling. For they knew the street, remembered it from childhood, all complete, without a gap, yet ne'er before had seen that royal porch, that high-built, fair demesne. So in they hurried all, mazed, curious and keen, save one, who looked thereon with eye severe, and with calm planted steps walked in austere. 'Twas Apollonius. Something too he laughed, as though some knotty problem that had daft his patient thought had now begun to thaw and solve and melt. 'Twas just as he foresaw. He met within the murmurous vestibule his young disciple. "'Tis no common rule, Lycius," said he, "for uninvited guest to force himself upon you and infest with an unbidden presence the bright throng of younger friends. Yet must I do this wrong, and you forgive me." Lycius blushed and led the old man through the inner doors broad spread. With reconciling words and courteous mien, turning into sweet milk the sophist's spleen. Of wealthy lustre was the banquet room, filled with pervading brilliance and perfume. Before each lucid panel, fuming stood a censer fed with myrrh and spiced wood, each by a sacred tripod held aloft, whose slender feet wide swerved upon the soft, wool-woofed carpets. 50 wreaths of smoke from 50 censers their light voyage took to the high roof, still mimicked as they rose along the mirrored walls by twin clouds odorous. 12 sphered tables by silk seats ensphered, high as the level of a man's breast reared on Libard's paws, upheld the heavy gold of cups and goblets, and the store thrice told of Ceres' horn, and in huge vessels wine come from the gloomy tun with merry shine. Thus loaded with a feast the tables stood, each shrining in the midst the image of a god. When in an antechamber every guest had felt the cold full sponge to pleasure pressed by ministering slaves upon his hands and feet, and fragrant oils with ceremony meet poured on his hair, they all moved to the feast in white robes, and themselves in order placed around the silken couches, wondering whence all this mighty cost and blaze of wealth could spring. Soft went the music, the soft air along, while fluent Greek a vowelled undersong kept up among the guests, discoursing low at first, for scarcely was the wine at flow, but when the happy vintage touched their brains, louder they talk, and louder come the strains of powerful instruments. The gorgeous dyes, the space, the splendour of the draperies, the roof of awful richness, nectarous cheer, beautiful slaves, and Lamia's self appear now, when the wine has done its rosy deed, and every soul from human trammels freed, no more so strange. For merry wine, sweet wine, will make Elysian shades not too fair, too divine. Soon was god Bacchus at meridian height, flushed were their cheeks, and bright eyes double bright. Garlands of every green and every scent, from vales deflowered, or forest trees branch rent, in baskets of bright osseored gold were brought high as the handles heaped, to suit the thought of every guest, that each, as he did please, might fancy fit his brows, silk-pillowed at his ease. What wreath for Lamia? What for Lycius? What for the sage old Apollonius? Upon her aching forehead be there hung the leaves of willow and of adder's tongue. And for the youth, quick, let us strip for him the thyrsus, that his watching eyes may swim into forgetfulness. And for the sage, let spear-grass and the spiteful thistle wage war on his temples. Do not all charms fly at the mere touch of cold philosophy? There was an awful rainbow once in heaven. We knew her woof, her texture. She is given in the dull catalogue of common things. Philosophy will clip an angel's wings, conquer all mysteries by rule and line, empty the haunted air and nomad mine, unweave a rainbow, as it erewhile made the tender-personed Lamia melt into a shade. By her glad Lycius, sitting in chief place, scarce saw in all the room another face, till, checking his love trance, a cup he took full brimmed, and opposite sent forth a look cross the broad table to beseech a glance from his old teacher's wrinkled countenance and pledge him. The bald-head philosopher had fixed his eye, without a twinkle or stir, full on the alarmed beauty of the bride, browbeating her fair form, and troubling her sweet pride. Lycius then pressed her hand with devout touch, as pale it lay upon the rosy couch. 'Twas icy, and the cold ran through his veins. Then sudden it grew hot, and all the pains of an unnatural heat shot to his heart. Lamia, what means this? Wherefore dost thou start? Knowest thou that man? Poor Lamia answered not. He gazed into her eyes, and not a jot owned they the love-lorn piteous appeal. More he gazed, his human senses reel. Some hungry spell that loveliness absorbs. There was no recognition in those orbs. Lamia, he cried, and no soft-toned reply. The many heard and the loud revelry grew hush. The stately music no more breathes, the myrtle sickened in 1,000 wreaths. By faint degrees, voice, lute, and pleasure ceased. A deadly silence, step by step, increased, until it seemed a horrid presence there, and not a man but felt the terror in his hair. Lamia, he shrieked, and nothing but the shriek with its sad echo did the silence break. "Begone, foul dream!" he cried, gazing again in the bride's face, where now no azure vein wandered on fair-spaced temples. No soft bloom misted the cheek, no passion to illume the deep recessed vision. All was blight. Lamia, no longer fair, there sat a deadly white. "Shut, shut those juggling eyes, thou ruthless man! Turn them aside, wretch, or the righteous ban of all the gods, whose dreadful images here represent their shadowy presences, may pierce them on the sudden with the thorn of painful blindness, leaving thee forlorn in trembling dotage to the feeblest fright of conscience for their long-offended might, for all thine impious proud heart sophistries, unlawful magic, and enticing lies. Corinthians, look upon that grey-beard wretch. Mark how, possessed, his lashless eyelids stretch around his demon eyes. Corinthians, see, my sweet bride withers at their potency." "Fool," said the sophist in an undertone gruff with contempt, which a death-nighing moan from Lysias answered, as heart-struck and lost he sank supine beside the aching ghost. "Fool, fool," repeated he, while his eyes still relented not nor moved. "From every ill of life have I preserved thee to this day, and shall I see thee made a serpent's prey?" Then Lamia breathed death breath. The sophist's eye, like a sharp spear, went through her utterly, keen, cruel, prescient, stinging. She, as well as her weak hand could any meaning tell, motioned him to be silent. Vainly so, he looked and looked again, a level no. "A serpent," echoed he, no sooner said than with a frightful scream she vanished. And Lysias's arms were empty of delight, as were his limbs of life from that same night. On the high couch he lay, his friends came round, supported him, no pulse or breath they found, and, in its marriage robe, the heavy body wound.